and Councillor Jones. Thank you. Item 4, LGR. Before we begin, I should note that the report in this agenda was published before the government announcement, and therefore it doesn't include all the details of the announcement. So I invite the Leader of the Council to provide an update on the announcement and the next steps.
Thank you, Chair. I do welcome this opportunity to provide a short introduction beforehand and then over to Michelle and Karen, who will take members through the detailed briefing and slides. Local government reorganisation is the government-mandated process which will replace this current two-tier system across Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent with the new unitary council agreements. Government has confirmed its decision for a North and South Mid-Staffordshire geography, and the slides that follow will recap the journey to date, the proposal submitted, the milestones ahead and the work underway to prepare for implementation. County Council submitted its own proposal in November 2025 following a Cabinet decision to put forward a 2 unitary East-West. While the Government has reached a different decision, our focus now is to work constructively across the area to support implementation and ensure the new agreements are delivered safely and effectively. It is important to recognise that the councils across the area submitted different proposals and views during the process. Now the decision has been made, our priority is to move the proposal development in readiness and implementation, supporting a safe There is no immediate change to your day-to-day council services. Essentially, services continue to be delivered while the transition works takes place in parallel. So there's nothing to worry about for any residents, any businesses at all. Officers have already done a significant amount of work preparation. This includes establishing programme governance, creating a joint way of working across Staffordshire Councils and Stoke City Council. The next phase will be about readiness and implementation following the decision. To agree joint working agreements with partners across Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, including the setting up of voluntary joint committees. These are temporary cross-council bodies that oversee the development of the joint implementation plan. To set up the implementation team, who are the officers responsible for doing the detailed work needed to make sure the councils are ready to operate from day one. Responsible for government's further requests, supplying information that will follow them to draft the structural change order. The structural change order is the government's legal instruction that formally creates the new councils and sets the rules and timetable for moving the current council to the new agreements. Thank you, Chair, and I'll pass over to Michelle and Karen to take the members through these slides, and obviously I'll be welcome any questions after that.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Leader. I will just run members through the slides. I think the covering report, as it says, the objective here is to provide an update and the background on the process to date and to have a look forward as well into terms of the next steps, building on what the Leader has already said. So this briefing effectively summarises our position and actions to date, looks at the progress we've made critically to make sure that we're ready for the decision, and just provides a little bit more detail on the recent government updates and announcements to help us move forward. So, in terms of a recap, as the Leader has already stated, LGR is a government-mandated process aimed at creating a single tier of unitary authorities across Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent. All services will then be delivered by single unitary authorities rather than the mixed model that we currently have in place across the area. As members will be aware, the government set out a number of criteria, 6 criteria to be met when considering proposals. And alongside local government reorganisation, the government, as we understand it, still wants a complete map of devolution across the area in terms of creation of foundation strategic authorities, though no announcement has yet been made on anything for Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire as we sit here today. As I've stated earlier, there's currently a mixed model of service delivery across Stoke-on-Trent on Staffordshire, with county councils and district councils each having differing responsibilities, and the single unitary in Stoke-on-Trent delivering all of the services and responsibilities of a local authority. As we transition to local government reform, it will be 2 unitary authorities who will deliver all of the responsibilities and services of local government across the area. As the leader has mentioned and members will be aware, the County Council submitted a proposal in November 25 in response to the government's invitation to submit proposals. A policy decision was made by the Cabinet to put forward an east-west unitary option for the county in Stoke-on-Trent. And that was based on an analysis around not just financial viability, but in terms of the balance of impact on both of the areas. Members will also be aware that there was a number of differing proposals submitted across the area. There were 6 business cases for 5 different geographical proposals, which are all outlined on this slide with varying levels of details, some of which were contained within existing local authority boundaries and some which would have required amendments to local authority boundaries. In submitting our proposal and putting forward the recommendation for the east-west split, Staffordshire County Council undertook effectively a financial modelling of all of these proposals using a common modelling framework. And the clear conclusion here was that the north-south and east-west split were relatively equitable in terms of the financial implications. But as I've said previously, for east-west, when we looked at the impact on differing groups, differing segments of the population, we felt it was a more balanced approach. So in terms of milestones, just to kind of recap how we've got to where we are today, members will be aware that the government published their English devolution white paper back in 2024, which outlined the proposals both for local government reorganisation and, as we've suggested, devolution. Interim proposals were invited in March 2025, and the government provided feedback on those proposals last summer and then invited final proposals to be submitted in November of last year, which we've discussed already. A consultation process was held by the government in February of this year, and we'll discuss that in a little bit more detail further on. And then in March 2026, the government released much more detailed guidance on the implementation and principles for implementation of local government reorganisation, which I'll touch on in the coming slides. And then, as we know, the government took its final decision on the 16th of July in terms of the proposed recommendation for Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire. This slide really sets out at a high level, so what have we been doing locally? There's been a vast amount of activity underway locally in terms of ensuring that we're prepared for the decision. Back in March this year, Staffordshire County Council led on the development of a microsite that hosted the government consultation, and a joint programme management office was established between Staffordshire County Council and Stoke-on-Trent to ensure that we were able to drive some of the preparatory work forward across the area. We've established an area-wide steering group and a programme board comprising the chief executives of the local authorities, and we also undertook a bit of scoping work to identify what are the preparatory work streams that needed to be put in place to ensure that we're ready to deliver and move at pace once we receive the government's decision. We've responded to government requests for information, and we have effectively supported that partnership working across the area during that time. Just like to take a couple of minutes just to sort of dive into that work in a little bit more detail so members get a full picture of some of the work that's been undertaken. So in terms of government consultation, I've spoken about that. It was closed on the 26th of March this year. As I've said already, we hosted a joint microsite to enable members of the public and interested stakeholders to participate in that engagement. And as part of the process, MHCLG held a series of listening sessions with officers from across the county to test and discuss the various proposals that had been put forward. We participated in a session on the 23rd of March this year. And the council also submitted its final response to that consultation on the 25th of March. In May, MHCLG confirmed to us that they'd received over 1,800 responses to that consultation process. And we've just discovered that the consultation results were published a couple of days ago, so we will provide members with a link to those, and we are putting together a summary of those to be able to share with members afterwards. So in terms of programme management, I've talked about the fact that we've created a coherent approach to programme managing this vast amount of work across Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire. We've got really strong governance in place, with the programme board headed by the CEOs reporting into the leaders board, and a directors steering group and a number of themed work streams. The single PMO hosted by the County Council and the City Council is really important in helping us to coordinate the vast amount of work that's underway across all of the partner organisations. And it's really the engine room of the process at the moment, making sure that we're coordinated in the work that we're doing, that we're compliant, and we're providing assurance to members that the work is proceeding as planned. Just delve into that in a little bit more detail. In terms of getting ready for the decision was taken to be proportionate in what we did prior to the government finalising its view, but to actually make sure that we were ready. So I identified 7 interim work streams. These are cross-cutting work streams that allowed us to baseline data across all 10 local authorities in key areas such as finance, human resources, assets and property, and so on. And also started to identify a series of risks and dependencies between the various areas of work. So our current focus is on finalising that baseline information, undertaking assurance work to make sure that the information is accurate, or we understand whether there are any issues with it, so that we can move at pace as we move forward into the implementation phase and ensure that we're ready to move. As the leader has already outlined, the structural change order will be the key piece of legislation that will actually allow for the creation of the 2 unitary authorities and the dissolution of all the predecessor authorities. The government did seek views from all authorities across Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire in May this year on various matters that may be contained in the SCO, and we submitted a formal response to that on the 16th of June. Since this committee last had a briefing on LGR, the government have issued a whole series of more detailed guidance. So in March 2026, MHCLG issued guidance on how we should go about implementing LGR. So in broad terms, they've split it into 2 phases. Phase 1, the first transition period, is the period between the publication of the structural change order and the new council elections, which will be held in May 2027. Period 2, transition period 2, is the period from the following the new council elections to vesting day, which will be the 1st of April 2028, so the day in which the new organisations come into place, and shadow councils will sit during that period. The structural change order will also provide more details about the role of the key implementation bodies. We've talked about the joint committees already, the shadow councils, and also what the role of the predecessor councils will be as we move through this really complicated process going forward. From the guidance, we can already understand that predecessor councils, so our existing local authorities, will continue to operate fully during the whole period of transition, moving forward and delivering these key businesses and key services, to businesses and residents that we are here to deliver. As the leader has stated, joint committees will be set up to provide some preparatory work. So joint committees are a formal shared decision-making body between a number of local authorities. They're there to work together on key issues, including local government transition. We will be formally required to establish the joint committees once the structural change order in place, but best practice from elsewhere and strong advice from government is that we actually establish these on a voluntary basis in advance of the structural change order, so that we can ensure that members have full sight and assurance over the preparation work that's underway. After the elections, as I've said, the shadow councils with the newly elected members will replace the joint committees and responsible for driving forward key decisions about the new local authorities in preparation for vesting day. And then there will be a single implementation team across the area made up of chief executives and other senior officers whose job it will be to work throughout that both transition periods to support the implementation of the new local authorities. And as I've said already, the structural change order will set out specific duties, more details on the governance arrangements and the statutory deadlines for the completion of the work. Elections for the new unitary councils will be held in May 2027, following the publication of the structural change order earlier that year. And once elected, the shadow authority will be that temporary governing body for the new unitary council before it legally comes into effect as two new authorities on the 1st of April 2028. Critically, the shadow authority's mandate is for future governance, so looking ahead, making key decisions around the operation and functioning of the new local authorities. So as I've said, it's the key role is preparing for the new council, so doing all the key planning, organisational and decision making and budget setting to ensure that the new council is ready to operate in a safe and legal manner from day one. Setting up the new governance, establishing the shadow executive and committee structure and managing those interim governance arrangements and approving key policies. I've talked about budget but also constitution and making key appointments to the senior staffing structure for the new authorities. The shadow authority and our existing authorities will continue to run in parallel, but they have very different responsibilities. The shadow authorities are there to build the new council, whilst the existing councils are responsible for delivering all of our services, but also supporting the implementation process as we move forward. The following slide is a visual provided by government that tries to sort of outline the two transition periods that I've talked about. As we move towards unitary authorities and the role of the implementation team and the predecessor councils playing into both of those transition periods as we move forward. I think as the Chair has alluded to, these papers and presentation were finalised prior to the government's decision. The leader has already outlined, as members will know, what the nature of the government's decision is. We are now moving towards mobilisation, really. So we know that we're going to have the two unitary authorities. We know the footprint of those, and they will utilise the existing local authority footprints. So there are no boundary changes. The government in its decision letter set out a number of reasons for its decision, and those included their view that it was a sensible economic geography that could best support housing supply and economic growth, that it provided a strong option for public service delivery, and it performed strongly against their financial stability and efficiencies test. So our attention is now turning to the post-decision world in terms of what we're focusing on now. So we are awaiting the receipt of the formal structural changes order, which will set out a lot of the detail that I've discussed earlier. We're also continuing work across the County Council and with our partner organisations to identify and ensure that we can mobilise the right officer capacity. This is a massive programme of work, and we're charged with performing this and delivering business as usual. So there's a huge amount of work to do to make sure that we've got the right resources in place. We continue to engage with other areas that are further ahead than us on the journey to ensure that we're learning from best practice, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to be prepared to move forward. And we're making sure that we can mobilise quickly post the decision phase. The timetables, as members will appreciate, are quite tight, and there's a lot of work to be done, but we are very ready and ready to move forward. I think that's the end of my presentation. So thank you for your time today, and obviously happy to take any questions or feedback.
Just before we go into questions, on the link you said about the consultation results, will you be able to send that to the committee as...
I will do, yes. We'll circulate that after the meeting.
That's probably everyone will find that interesting about what came from that.
No problem at all.
I'll open up the committee to questions now. Does anyone have questions? Councillor Egginton.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I'm questioning why 6 or 7 other councils throughout the UK have initiated a judicial review. Therefore, can I ask if the Chair and the committee if a judicial review should be launched against the government's LGR statutory change order. Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to answer that, Councillor Murray?
Thank you. Yeah. I think at the moment there's 3 that have, possibly another 2 to offer in. The difference being the ones that have, like Hampshire and Essex, they were given numbers that were not in the original white paper nor in the guidance given, i.e. numbers of 250,000 thereabouts per unitary. The one that's been given to Staffordshire does fall within the original remit, if you like, the guidance given, which limits the argument for judicial review. Also, the judicial reviews doesn't necessarily mean the government has to adhere to them. This, remember, everything we do from now on is not an endorsement of, but we have to do the work, and that is the most important thing. Whether we are engaged or not, this continues with or without us. And the whole point has been that we must be part of this. And that really does put the essence onto these. The first stage, these voluntary joint committees, will be an important piece. Judicial reviews are a very technical legal term, and the one that's been given to Staffordshire doesn't necessarily fall into that one. I really do get the point for it. If they'd have given us, like they did with Hampshire, I think their lowest was 248,000, something like that, unitary authority, it sort of bankrupts them within the first year or two. A lot of the reports out the County Council Network, LGA, a lot of the big consultancy firms stated it had to be around about 400,000 plus to be financially viable. To fall below that number sort of puts you straight away to failure at this model. The proposal put forward that we now have to follow by government does not hit those limits, so again prevents any argument back at a legal sense. And that's the only reason why on the 2 unitary there's no real case for judicial review or legal challenge. I don't know if Michelle Cowan has anything else to add on to that one.
I would concur with the leader's point. I think the government set out a series of 6 criteria in terms of how they would make the decision. That included minimum size of around 500,000 population, as long as other facets. I think when we assess the decision that they've taken against their original criteria, there is very little room for us to dispute that, which is quite different, I believe, to other areas where they haven't really sort of complied with their own decision-making criteria.
Chair, thank you. Does everybody think that we can meet the timescales and the timelines on this? Because, as you've said, there's an awful lot of work. And I just wonder, if we do run over, what would the cost be and the cost implications on the model, on the financial modelling?
Can I just quickly come in? The timescales for this I've mentioned before in council and other meetings is frankly, looks a little insane is the word I've used. And again, it's the importance of why we must get on with this work. Failure to do so can actually put people at risk, those vulnerable people, those vital services that we, local government, have to deliver. The importance of getting that done to work collaboratively across everybody is the importance. That's what it comes down to. Timescale can be reached, and I'm going to pass over now to give some of the detail of where we've already been doing a lot of that work where we can beforehand.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, absolutely. I think the timescales are challenging, but I think as I outlined in the presentation and prior to me, I've been in post for 3 weeks, and I'm hugely impressed with the amount of work that's already been undertaken to ensure that we are ready to deliver to those timetables. Critically within that, we're identifying those very important things that need to be done as a priority to ensure that the councils are safe and legal from day one. But there's a whole raft of other work that's already underway across those key work streams. We are not resting on our laurels. We are now moving into implementation phase and starting to mobilise across a wider range of work streams. I think the other strength is the partnership working that's been undertaken across all 10 local authorities, irrespective of the differing proposals that were put forward and so on and so forth. We've had really strong engagement from members and senior officers and chief executives from across the area in terms of mobilising that work and ensuring that the resources are there to deliver. But I don't know, Michelle, if you want to add in.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Thanks for the question. So there is no doubt, as Martin said, that we have had to work at kind of a crazy pace, and I make no apologies for that, to make sure that we keep the momentum. We are following in line with the guidance as it's issued. It's meant that we need to be agile and flexible as we've gone, but we had a conversation just yesterday about, I think, the work that we've done so far has meant that we've got really strong foundations in place. As Martin said, the pace of the activity needs to continue. The timescales are absolutely very, very challenging, but the work that we've done through establishing a joint programme management office, which has been really helpful, the work that we've done around mobilising 7 foundational work streams that have involved cross-organisational working across all of the local authorities has been really helpful. We've already done a significant amount of work around gathering relevant data to make sure that we are in a good position to go now that we are post-decision, and once next steps are progressed in line with the presentation that Karen set out. So I think absolutely the timescales are challenging. I think we are in as good a position as we could be as a local authority to respond to those.
Thank you for that. Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the introductions. I just wanted to echo really what I've heard in terms of the timescales. I'm concerned of the time, as we all are, but you know those milestones unfortunately can't be moved, so we're going to have to work to them. Generally, as we look around the county, my biggest concern with LGI is that Staffordshire will effectively stagnate for the next few years because councils are winding up their big projects and they're not embarking on anything new for residents, so we're just doing business as usual. And then the first couple of years of the council will all be frantically trying to set up a brand new council and not thinking ahead to big, important projects for our residents. So as we go through this process, one for Councillor Murray really, can you assure me that we have the right resource in-house, or do we have to go out and hire more people for this? And I noticed that you put in Councillor Machin into a new cabinet support role, which is great for Councillor Machin. Could you explain more about what that role is to do? Because I think it's important over the next 12 months we have regular updates to this committee on how we're doing, and maybe Councillor Machin and yourself can come back more regularly and tell us more. That's all for now. Thank you.
It's all very valid points. None of us really agree with the unitary model, certainly the timescale given, but it's here and we have to deal with it. I think we have sent out joint letters, a couple of them, for a single Staffordshire strategic authority. Now, by giving us that would help to guarantee those future projects, those new growth corridors, that extra investment, that lobbying action, which for so many years is often forgotten within the corridors of Whitehall, should we say, and we often miss out. Those still exist, and I'll emphasise again to make this work through properly, correctly, so nothing gets forgotten or left out. That voluntary joint committee has to work cross-party so strongly. Those initial, the phrase I've used is concrete foundation blocks. Now, as soon as we have the elections in May, new committees come over, there will be a different political makeup. Which way that is, that's down to the people to decide. And they can change all of this that we do now. But if we have joint, and there is quite a even, well, not quite even, but there's a different split of Labour, Conservative, Reform across our county, some agreement, whatever that political split in May comes on, some of these blocks are already there, and that will save us months of time and work. The other one is, because obviously we have the 2 joint committees, voluntary ones, and in the future that will sit north and south, to try and find alignment which will look at Staffordshire. Now that voice, that single Staffordshire voice, where we can find alignment to go for those big projects early on and then after the elections, will be vital of the success, the greatness that Staffordshire can then become. I mean, the comments have often used that beating heart of the country. It really can build it up. So we have to get those early agreements in that then will ease the workflow and, well, not necessarily ease, but simplify it. If we're fighting against each other, it will make the officers' time even harder. And then you said that stagnation of what happens next can ensue and become a reality. If we work together on those early commitments where we can, it will make it better. The new role, I think, is so important to bring Councillor Machin in at the cost of swapping out for adult health care. It's really to make sure that all portfolios have that peripheral vision of the interaction of everybody else, because every decision we make now, certainly with LGR, and to give the information then back to each portfolio, guarantees we're all having sight of the same information at all times. Your highways will directly affect schooling. Your schooling directly affects further education, which directly affects your jobs. Now, without the jobs, that directly affects crime, it directly affects healthcare. They all interact. Some are leading indicators, some have an effect that comes down the chain. So to make sure we're all aligned on that, and hence that support role to float between all, to guarantee everybody has sight of what everybody else is doing, is really, really important. And regular updates, I will try and make this, and certainly those joint committees and to our bodies, to try and keep this quite public. I think it needs to be on those actions.
Come back slightly, and thank you for that answer. And you know, you've got a guarantee from me that this is not a political situation at all. We're in agreement that this is not a good situation we find ourselves in as a county. But I just want to push you on the point of resource, because my experience of councils is that, you know, they're very tightly ran. You know, directors and assistant directors have large remits to run, and there's very little wiggle room there to add anything else in. I know that as a county, we've recently had a hiring freeze. I'm not sure if that's still in place, but I am concerned that we're going to be putting our officers, not just in the county council, but in our districts and boroughs, under undue stress to get this ready in time. So do we need more resource? I see the officers are nodding. Do we need more resource and more staff, either in this council or in other councils, or, you know, to help the joint committees? And, you know, is that something you'd commit to?
It is tight, it is hard, and I think if you have any extra information to give on this one, I have given a very, very clear instruction to all of our senior leadership team, and I know others have now. I know the chief executives meet up now on a regular basis, as they're likely to do so. Bodies will now be formed up, getting officers from all the districts, all the boroughs, to fit within the PMO to get the work all done. It is tight, it is hard. I believe it can be done. The only thing that will slow this or put hindrance in it is the politics. This continues with or without us. It was always the point I made very early on, that this continues with or without anybody here, whoever that may be. And it's very much important that we sit at that table. It helps with that workload, gives clear instruction that the work we do now will continue and not be scrapped and start all over again after the election. And that has happened in different unitaries in the past, which just causes that stagnation for the next 2-3 years. I don't know if you have anything more to add on to that workflow, but we are bringing it in. I do believe we can do it.
Thank you for the question. So yeah, the nod was really an acknowledgement that we need to be aware of how we manage our resources moving forward. You're absolutely right. It's something that we need to be really mindful of. Everybody is already fully occupied, but just some reassurance around that. So we've already started to do the work across the organisation to look to determine potential resourcing implications across the council, not just for those that might be involved, like myself and Karen, directly around project programme delivery, but more about as we move through the process, gradually over time, all of our roles will become absorbed as part of local government reorganisation, inevitably, as we change organisations. So we've already started to do that work looking across the council. We've cast the net out wide to look at other local authorities who have gone before us to understand about how that looks over a period of time, the parts of the organisation that would be most impacted. So, for example, those that support our people, our workforce, that kind of thing, and to determine what numbers might start to look like as we transition. We will need to think about, as an organisation, as part of that, about how we reprioritise our work as we move forward. So that will become increasingly important, but that's something that I think we're all used to doing across the organisation anyway, because the jobs that we do mean that we have to flex and be agile. Clearly, Karen's been appointed into a new role, specific role that focuses on LGR. We've also had a couple of other recent appointments, again, across the organisation. People are thinking about potential implications on services as a result of the changes that we go through as we deliver on the LGR agenda. So very mindful around the resourcing work, very live conversations across the organisation about how we make sure that we respond to that in a way that means that, in the way that Martin said, we continue to be able to deliver as we need to. Thank you.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. Just before I get on to questions, it was a great presentation, but you didn't have the opportunity to introduce yourself. So we've been talking a lot about your roles, but I think as a courtesy, firstly, but also just so that we understand exactly what your roles are, would you mind just doing that?
No, thank you. So my name's Karen Tierney. As Michelle said, I've been brought into the organisation working with Lindsay Bissell as a strategic lead for local government reorganisation and devolution. So a big part of my job will be to do, as Michelle has just said, to understand and support the organisation in terms of delivery and ensuring that we have the resources in the right places. Also supporting the work around devolution, which I think perhaps alludes to a little bit of the question that we've just had, particularly around some of our major strategic projects, to continue to push for that foundation strategic authority as a key vehicle for that. So I said I'm 3 weeks into the post, and yeah, very, very excited to be here. Thank you.
Where did you join us from?
So I was previously at Stafford Borough Council for a few years. I headed up the development services there, so economic growth, housing, health and planning, development management work. Prior to that, worked at a number of unitaries, including in Manchester, so was very involved in setting up the combined authority in Greater Manchester, so some experience of cross-organisational working as well as programme delivery. Okay, thank you.
So I've been here before, so I'm Assistant Director for Strategy and Transformation. I was joint LGR Programme Management Office Lead up until the point that Karen joined us. I suppose the point about responding to the need for resources, what Karen joining the organisation has meant is that I can focus on everything else that needs to be delivered around our transformation and change agenda. But Karen and I continue to work closely, hence the reason you've got two of us today, because of the work that's been done so far versus the work that Karen will now pick up.
That's brilliant. Thank you for that. I just think, because we'll be seeing a lot of you, I suspect, over the next year or so, so really helpful. And great, we've got someone who's got an insight into the new Prime Minister's way of doing things as well. Hope he remembers that not everywhere's a city. Okay, so just a few questions and points for me, which I might chunk up into two bits, but we'll see how we go. So the first thing to say is, Leader and I have talked since the announcement, and we're very clear with one another that this is not a matter for local politicking between parties. If we want to do any politicking, we might do it towards the Labour Party nationally for imposing this unnecessary decision on us, but we are going to work together sensibly as Staffordshire folk on this, which doesn't mean that we won't ask hard questions of one another, but this is not a football to be kicked around. It's something where we've got to work together. With that in mind, first question that I have is around the outreach that we're doing with national political representatives. So our MPs seem to have been, I think, pretty quiet on this. Just some fairly half-hearted statements from most of them. I'd be interested to know what engagement we have had with our MPs on this proactively from them. and then what we are doing to engage with them ourselves. Partly that's about our representation in that process in terms of how LGR actually manifests itself, because at the moment we haven't really got a lot of detail, have we? That structural change orders being, well, I'm sure a copy of it's been in a filing cabinet in London somewhere for a little while, but you know, what involvement have we got in that to try and bespoke it to the needs of Staffordshire and the needs of those two authorities that are going to be created? What engagement have we had with the minister who's responsible? Have they been invited to come to Staffordshire to talk to us? And finally, what engagement have we had from them on devolution? Because whilst we don't want, we don't need LGR, devolution we do want. And I'm really concerned listening to the new Prime Minister and his cabinet talking about all of the responsibilities and funding potentially that are flowing into mayoral authorities. And we're at a massive disadvantage in that process at the moment, and that seems really unjust. So I'd be very interested in where we're up to with those things, and then I'll come back to a couple of other points.
Thank you. Before I go on to some of the extra detail what's happened internally, I have to agree with the MPs. Unfortunately, we don't have any MPs, so we're sort of out of that loop internally ourselves in Staffordshire. But the comments that they've put online is at best lukewarm to their own government, and some have even gone against and objected to their own government's decision, which is quite telling. Little engagement is what I can say with the MP level. Across the country with leaders of unitaries and councils that are actually going through it right now, I've been in a couple of dozen meetings, some in person, quite a few at the LGA a few weeks back conference, several online, having best experiences from them all, that learnt experience, the gaps, those, if only we did this instead of done that, which is a bit why I'm mentioning that joint committee. It's one they've all said, I wish we'd have done that joint committee stronger first. It's one of the biggest learnings they've all said. The other big one is, as I've mentioned it, the fire sale and asset grab of local authorities tend to move their assets around into either the parish or other bodies. Every single one has stated that later on becomes a hindrance. I had several meetings with Teresa Grant, including one a couple of weeks ago, on the process for the joint committees. So quite a lot of involvement that way of basically not reinventing the wheel, because others are doing that. We have other areas that are in the mid-process of this, a few months into it already, that was announced earlier this year. Again, a lot of internal information about what they are doing. Some are doing JR, so it's less involvement. Others are getting fully involved. So again, it's a case of we do not need to reinvent the wheel with this, but we do have to push this wheel up a very, very steep hill. So let's keep it as smooth as possible. I don't know if you have any more info really on the engagement politically.
Just on the Devo point and what
Yeah.
we're doing, because our MPs can't can't get away with just
No.
dropping LGR on us which we don't need, essentially hiding themselves away over the summer and then doing nothing on the thing that we do really need, which is devolution. I'm sure you agree.
Totally agree. I did deliberately, when I first presented our option several months ago, make the football puns, because I knew very well then, or suspected, that they would not deliver this until 2 days before they break up for the summer. Sure enough, they did. I knew that would be in the middle of the World Cup. And that's unfortunate. But I think a deliberate act that's been done before. Devolution's gone quiet, and it's gone even more quiet since Andy Burnham has come from MP. He's made it very clear publicly that he has a different ambition, that he's very more in favour of going super mayors and mayoral authorities. What that actually transitioned to, plenty of rumours but no facts. Let's see, I will be writing to lead ministers, I will be writing to Andy Burnham and to MPs on that push for a single Staffordshire. I think the importance that Staffordshire has a political agreement, has the strength, has the finances, the business, the economy, and the growth opportunities to stand by itself as a very successful strategic authority by itself is really, really important point we need to push. And that is coming now. It was a little bit of waiting. Will we get anything on Devo? No, we didn't. Not a word on it. Just LGR. And then the break up for the summer. So we'll probably have to wait until they come back from their holidays before we get an answer. I think in one of the replies somebody said, will you now be breaking up for holiday? No, I will not be breaking up for summer holiday. I'll be here every single week. I've got 1 week off, but I'll be here every single day.
Thanks for that. And then just my second little batch of questions. So it was mentioned earlier about resources, and I'd like a little bit of reassurance that we're not going to embark on any big new projects of choice whilst we're delivering our business as usual. We've got some pretty chunky projects already in the pipeline, haven't we? Especially around IT systems and things like that. So a bit of reassurance for the committee that we won't be embarking any new ones that we don't have to do. And the second thing, completely separate, is I think it would be really useful if we had a standing agenda item at full council meetings for an LGR update as to where we are with things. So I don't need an answer on that today, but I'd be grateful if you could consider that. So I think that would provide some reassurance that there's always a public airing of where we're up to and an opportunity for all members to debate that. Thank you.
On the extra workload, we have a lot of deliverables still to achieve. Now, when the structural change order comes in, restrictions come into all district, boroughs and county council. So that sort of prevents any extra workload and spending to come in. What I will not stop on now is lobbying central government for that extra funding, because regardless of what happens next in the future, what the political makeup will be, we absolutely need that funding for our growth, that funding per child in school, which is one of the lowest in the country. Our funding for healthcare, again, Staffordshire, one of the lowest. We've really got to push that. And then our growth corridors, those large projects which in the last few years have that funding has dried all up nationwide as well, not just Staffordshire. But growth doesn't stop, business doesn't stop. We now do have the full bore tech revolution. AI is now here, and that will change the world. And we have to be ready for it, and I think we can lead on it. So those pieces pushing and lobbying forward will absolutely continue. But as for adding on a new huge workload, I think it would be restricted if we did, because the structural change order comes in. It fits better that we have large-scale plans that no matter who takes over can be implemented under the shadow authority without it scrapping it and then going for something totally different afterwards. And that is a risk that others, again, that reinvent the wheel, learn from our mistakes. So let's make sure it is aligned, that we make it right for the county and for the people and the business. As for the update at council, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I will be keeping where it's right to do so, making this very public. So I think everybody, businesses, consumer confidence, business confidence needs clarity on this at every stage. So that's needed to steady the ship and build confidence in our county.
Councillor Cooper.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, members. It's delighted to be appointed or elected or whatever to this particular committee from full council of the week, and it's nice to see that everybody's adhering to the new dress code policy that the council decided to implement. So that's a good start from the beginning from my point of view. Regarding other factors regarding LGR, it's also nice that we have unanimity again across the council. That was demonstrated in the full council meeting the other week. For those members that were there and that attended, obviously I can't speak for the people that didn't attend, but the people that were there was cross-party unanimity. Let's just remember where we are with LGR. There's no mandate for this from the people, from Staffordshire. We were never given the choice or the option. It was forced upon us. My colleague opposite points that out very adequately. I'm of the view as well that, yes, we have to follow the legal obligations. When I sat in the seat over there, Councillor Murray currently is, we have to do as we are required to by law. However, that doesn't preclude us from raising objections, writing to the government, to MPs, to petitioning, to continually tell everybody that this has no democratic legitimacy whatsoever. It's a policy that was foisted upon us, and we are now having to react to that. And I'm surprised also that the trade unions haven't made a noise as well, or very little, because it does affect an awful lot of people, their jobs and their careers and their futures across many councils across this great county. I virtually hear nothing. There's a lot of uncertainty, great presentation and slides, but there are lots of questions that probably can't be answered now and will be answered in the coming weeks and months. This idea of if the council runs up to a certain date, everything stops and the new one automatically kicks in as a smooth transition. We know in reality that business and ideas don't work in that way. So we have questions about who has primacy of decision making. Is it the shadow authority, is it the previous authority, whatever, when projects, and that will be thrashed out with these joint committees and such like. But there are lots and lots of issues here that I have concerned about, and it even goes down to the lower levels. I had a phone call the other day from Chris Williams, who runs the Samaritans in Tamworth, and he informs me they are going to lose their funding for the Samaritans as a result of changes at local authority level. Now, we see the big picture here, the big overall, but the people at the bottom of the pyramid, they get impacted on this. And that will have real-world consequences if that trickle down, that management all the way from county, borough, district, etc., isn't managed properly and funds are either denied or stored or whatever. And I take the point as well, my colleague opposite made about stagnation, speaking to members in Northamptonshire, when they split the county of Northamptonshire into two parts. They're still going through the process. I think it's 5 years since they did it, 5 years, and it still hasn't been resolved and reconciled. So anybody who thinks this is going to happen on day one and will be completed as a project within 6 to 12 months will be very, very sadly mistaken. It will take a lot more of that, and there is a huge economic impact on that, about policy decision making, who does what. And ultimately, who's paying for this? Is this going to come out of the taxpayers of Staffordshire, or is the government going to give a huge chunk of money? We know the debt that Stoke-on-Trent has, and I'd like to find out exactly some granular details over time. So this document is out of date now, from finance. Exactly what are we going to cost, or what is it going to cost us, and what are the government going to put into the kitty? Because I don't think the people of Staffordshire should be picking up the bill for a policy that has no democratic mandate or legitimacy. I mean, we're getting pretty used to this with Andy Burnham now. He hasn't got a mandate. We now have it with local government. And I say, from our MPs across this county, we've heard nothing at all. So there's some of the things that I think are key to this. It's, we can all talk about nice slides, but it's the actual granular stuff. And even down to some areas across Staffordshire don't have town or parish councils or structures in place. And we can abolish towns, districts and boroughs in the city of Stoke and Staffordshire County Council, but there's real world consequences at a local level with assets they hold. I know Tamworth Borough Council last night had an extraordinary meeting to discuss the assets of the town because of all of this. Talking about fire sales across this county of different bodies trying to balance their books in this whole process. So I just ask that members are mindful of that, and I'm delighted we have so far unanimity on this particular topic. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. It's quite a pleasure to see Councillor Cooper back in these chambers again. Nice to see you here again. Local funding is clearly an issue, and Samaritan is just one of many. One thing people should understand with this is that always right from the start, a local council front desk will still exist in the areas they do that type of same footprint, where people, businesses can still go to a front desk, see an actual physical person, pick up those forms, have those meetings and see where. That's really important. And again, it's another leaning for these local councils to really build those community hubs. Codsall House is a great example. Obviously, within Newcastle, they have another great example of one. We really need those in every single area. Again, the economics of scale, when they become a big community hub with all the different services upstairs, where you have not only the councillors, the council services, but things like probationary, child services, adult services, police, housing, drug rehabilitation, can all sort of operate under one roof and physically see each other. Those areas there, through the initial elected committee that then later formulates the new structure, can raise and show where those gaps are, that lower level funding, that localised funding, because different areas do have different demands. And that gets brought up at those committees there once you have the elected body that can enforce them. Trying to do that finite detail too early can take away from more essential, but also then just be scrapped if it's a different political makeup. So let's get things in the correct order. Funding for us all, the business models for the North, South, East, West was very similar. Basically, you take a 10 million loan, that's roughly to do the transformation for all of this, roughly paid back in just under 4 years. The government has given us some extra money. Is it 900,000? How much was the extra funding we've just received from government to do this? 900. It is 900,000 per unitary. Yeah, this is something that's going to cost several million, not 900,000. So the extra workload is immense, and no, the funding isn't coming. The debt to Stoke is obviously a concern to everybody. We all carry debt. I have a big and much further concern than Stoke's debt, and certainly now with our new PM who believes in supermarals. If Staffordshire becomes a combined authority, do we take Shropshire, who's already in financial distress, carries a much larger debt, and basically next year we'll probably go 114, and they absorb us into those areas. What is the greater ambition for devolution? That could be far more impactful, and that's why we must push forward that hard boundary that Staffordshire exists by itself, because there are greater risks on that. It's tight, but I think we have to make a success of it. Continues with or without us, as I keep saying. So we absolutely have to make a success of this. If we can get some of those joint agreements that ties these two unitaries together, one, will save money and be more efficient a lot quicker, and we'll get those big projects in and hit the local area.
So just coming back, and I absolutely concur with my colleague there. I mean, there's no disagreement between us. I think we've always sort of said with this whole project of LGR, it's something that's been foisted upon everybody. We just have to make the best of a bad job. But the point I was raising about the finer detail, which is not the part of this council, but that's the real world impact. We talk at a high level here. We talk about the big stuff. We talk about the stuff on the slides. We talk about how we all think. But the reality is it goes down the system. It gets down to the actual grassroots. And the impact is I get phone calls from people from Samaritans saying, I've been told by my local authority, we're not going to get any funding in the short term. That causes a huge problem. And everybody knows between Atherstone and Tamworth, that's a suicide black spot. So that's a real world consequence of these things. And we have to be just mindful of that all the way through the process. But thank you.
Can I just quickly add, as I mentioned earlier, between now and under the shadow area, nothing changes locally. Nothing changes. Your districts, your boroughs, your county council throughout that shadow authority will still continue to run. And that funding streams all still remains, those front door services all still remain. A lot of fear comes without the detail, and that detail, as I said, needs to be made public, and that is where we'll share it public where and right to do so every single time.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Leader, I just need to mention Cannock Chase. Obviously, it has its own identity, but I want to ask, we're being told local decision-making won't disappear where under reorganisation. What role would parish councils actually have, and where has this worked well elsewhere? And just to add, parish councils, after all, are the closest tier of government to residents. Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of that comes down to, I mentioned before about that community hub for every area that you have a council right now. The importance of that will, one, give a better service, that local service. Your officers, where you go to do a planning application, where you go to see about your business rates and your domestic rates, those services still will continue. And it continues on a caption area rather than an authority base. So those caption areas still exist. You still have to have that front desk. Parish councils are doing a lot of rumours. There is nothing in any paper that gives parish councils any extra powers, although some believe they do. There has been no forward for this. My one concern right now is that certain, and a little bit nationally, are going for super parishes, basically trying to enrol their own borough or district back under a single parish council. Stafford one, Tamworth being another for that whole area. A parish town council is not 78,000 people plus. I think that can devalue the great importance our parish councils have. Some are far too small and they need to be slightly larger. I think that can be easily done over time. I think the importance for a real town council that looks after that caption area of a town, be that Cannock, be it Stafford. A great example over the last decade or so would be that of Lichfield town. It has made that cathedral city town centre envy of the country. Great example of one. Another good one that is a slightly larger area would be Sutton Coldfield, who in recent years have transformed Sutton town and the outside area. So the importance of them can be great. At the moment, there is no detail that they gain any extra powers than they have today. They bring great clarity to that local voice. They hold great importance across our county, across our country. And they need to be of the right size, in my view. Not too small, and certainly not so large to try and encapsulate a whole area for some points in the future. I do hope in the future we see a town council for Cannock Town Centre, covering that area correctly. It's something I'd support, something I think I asked for, I think, 10 years ago, well, 8 years ago, was asking for that. It was pre-lockdown. So, yeah, it's something I'd like to see in that area.
Thank you for that. As it's been an hour on this, I'll move on to the next section. So thank you for the officers for coming in today and on the report. And thank you, Maury, for going through the LGR. For the recommendations, members are asked to note and the update on the current position of local government reorganisation. Are we happy with the recommendation? Agreed. Could I just add one more about with the update with the SR and the SEO, when that comes out in autumn time, could you come back to the committee with an update? Because it should, for scrutiny wise, we want to see what's happening as it progresses. So are we happy with that one too? All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming today. Item 5, the final financial outturn report 25-26. Our next item, I invite the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, Councillor Bagley, to present the report and go through the key points.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Committee. Obviously, you've all got the report in the pack, but just to run through some of the headlines from the outturn for 2025-26. Essentially, we delivered a £753 million budget with a small surplus in the face of rising costs for fuel, material, wages, and I suppose what can be best described as a very stubborn CPI. The report presents the final position for revenue and capital budgets for the end of 25-26. Essentially, this delivered an outturn underspend of £696 million, whilst at the same time ensuring that our obligations were met. It included a £330 million spend on adult social care, £223 million on services for vulnerable children and families, and also investments of £74 million in highways, £29 million in new and improved schools. So broad headlines of the report. Everyone's seen the report, so I'll hand back to yourselves for questions.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys.
Thanks, Councillor Bagley, for the report. I'm assuming we've all probably got similar questions as we discussed on the call yesterday. So, first of all, I want to say that the 6.696 million spent is very commendable, especially with it being the first year, obviously, that we've been in charge ourselves. However, some of it does seem to be one-off benefits or being dependent on the reserves that have been used, which is obviously fair enough. That's what they're there for if needed. So could I ask then, of the underspend, how much of it is genuine sustainable savings? And what are the plans for the areas, things like the children and families, that have been reliant on the reserves as they can't be kept being used in the long run? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is important that when including and looking at the MTFS that we only include recurrent savings on that basis. So it's, yeah, a portion remains one-off and should not be relied upon for future years. So that will be the case. I mean, I don't know if my colleagues want to just go into a bit more detail there.
Thank you, Councillor Bagley. So, absolutely right, Councillor. The position and the underspend that reported did rely heavily on 2 service reserves being used, primarily within health and care and children and families. The health and care was a planned use of that reserve as part of the MTFS setting process, and over the life of the MTFS, that ongoing use of the reserve is planned to come to zero, so that won't continue to fund cause a pressure within the financial position. Within children and families, that's a slightly different position. So the underlying overspend is around £4.5 million on children's placements. We are seeing that now continue into the current financial year, and there is a financial recovery plan in place, but that will have to be reflective within the future year's MTFS as to how we mitigate that pressure ongoing.
Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bagley, for that report. I just want a clarification because this 6.69 million that you've referred to as an underspend on page 42, the reasons for recommendations, point 3, it's down as a saving. So can I just get the clarification? Is it a saving or is it an underspend? Thank you.
I mean, it's an underspend. As you know, underspends are based upon the budget itself and might include other positions in there relating to borrowing and use of reserves, but that's an underspend of the actual revenue budget. So again, I don't know whether you class that as semantics or not, but it is an underspend, some of which produced by savings and efficiencies, but some of it by other areas. And again, I don't know if colleagues want to elaborate.
Just for awareness, that's terminology that has been used for many years in the quarterly reporting underspends as savings. For the new financial year, however, we have changed that terminology, so we're very clear that would be an underspend and savings would be recorded as savings, just so that confusion doesn't exist moving forward.
Thank you for that. No, I wasn't trying to make any particular point. It's just that there is obviously a fundamental difference in it. So, and I congratulate it and welcome it anyway. And any money that we've underspent and then we can put into other services or lower people's council tax is really important. I just think for the record we should make that clear. Thank you.
Councillor White.
Yeah, thank you very much. So just continuing on this point about being clear about our financial position. And I note that we're joined by a member of the press today, and I did read an article in the Stoke Sentinel the other day talking about savings that the council was making. So it is important because people do need to understand the reality of our financial position. And the good news is, as an authority, we've been really well run in terms of our finances for many years. We have a strong financial position that I think a lot of authorities will give their left arm to have. However, this underspend is it's not there's a very small element of it, as I understand it, that is genuinely what we would call a bankable saving. I don't think there's any recurring savings in here. The Director of Finance can elaborate on this if it's necessary, but I think the majority of it is down to lower energy costs than we accounted for when we were setting the MTFS, because energy prices haven't been as high. It's lower wage inflation, it's less money spent on concessionary fares for bus travel, and a variety of other one-off underspends where we simply haven't used the budget that was allocated. At the same time, we've got £6.7 million of reserve for health and care, adult health and care, that's been used. That was planned. That's absolutely fine that that's been drawn down upon. But we need to be clear that that is slightly more than the reported underspend on its own. But then the point that I really wanted to focus on is the overspend in children's and families, which is in the most important sense is absolutely fine, in that we need to provide what our children need, and if we have vulnerable children who require services from the county council or be taken into our care, we need to find the money for that. But we've got an overspend there of £4.5 million that's come from reserves. And my understanding is that is not likely to be a one-off, and that is going to be a long-term structural issue for the authority. It's distasteful talking about children in statistical terms, but the fact is the child who enters our care tends to remain in our care for quite a number of years on average. So I think it would be useful just to have a little bit of understanding, Councillor Bagley or Mr Shakespeare, or both, just in terms of what our thinking is on that and how we're planning to account for that, because I've got no interest in any politics on this either. It's the children's service, it's vulnerable children, but in terms of our financial position, that is something that has come in within the MTFS period. It's not something we planned for. I think our general reserves sit at about £60 million, which is around the SIPFA recommended level, I think, for an authority of our turnover. So it's not something that's easily simply dealt with by reserves in the long term. I know we'll get into this with the budget later on in the year, but as this has come as an unplanned overspend, I hope you don't mind me asking a little bit about it. We have to fund children's services, but we also have to know where the money's coming from. Thank you.
I pick that up. Kind of jumping ahead a bit to what I was going to talk about in the review later on, but you're dead right, and it's something that we're paying a lot of attention to, because at the moment it requires a structural change, because you can't continue to have such high impact expenditures on a recurring basis, because it's just not sustainable. Pete will go into a bit more detail, but a large part of it's been brought about by the sudden increase, which, dare I say, wasn't included in the original business plans of children in care, because essentially there's only two variables as far as that's concerned, and that is the cost of the care, or indeed the number of children going into care. Now, the cost of the care, that is something that will play a large part of what we're looking at in terms of cost recoveries and sorting this out. But the numbers in care, those, I mean, if you look at the projections on the graphs going back a couple of years, it was steady, and then suddenly there's huge increases which we've got to take care of now. It's up to something like 200-ish children going into care, which has caused this huge pressure that we're facing now. Suffice to say, you're exactly right. We are dealing with it, and I'm liaising with Pete and the team, and also the team that looks after that area to it's not a very technical expression, this, to sort it out. We're setting up monthly feedback in terms of where we're up to in terms of cost recoveries and what we're going to do. But if I may hand over to Pete to add on to that, then please.
Thank you, Councillor Bagley. So, first of all, Councillor White, pick up on your point of recurring savings. So within that 6.6 million underspend reported, there is a significant amount of recurring savings within there, so concessionary fares, the gas and electricity that you referred to, and they are figures that are in the existing MTFS for the current year and future, and but were delivered early. So we are seeing those in the MTFS. Not all of them, but a significant amount of them. As you rightly allude to, the pressure within children and families is a significant pressure for us. We're seeing that in the current financial year. There's a recovery plan in place for the organisation in the current financial year, because we're reminded that, and we'll come on to it in the next agenda item, about 20 million overspend is being forecast for the authority without any mitigating actions. But that does have a significant pressure on the MTFS. As Councillor Bagley's alluded to, plans are in place with the service, and probably you'd want assurance from the Director of Children and Families as to the actions that they are taking. However, it would appear at the moment that while there are some mitigations that can be taken, that is a longer term plan to reduce those numbers and the costs of those children in care, and that will take a number of years to feed through. And therefore, there will be a pressure on the authority that we will have to find corresponding savings for. Those plans will come forward as part of the MTFS as to how we achieve that balanced budget for next year and onwards.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chairman. We are the custodians of other people's money. We as elected members and officers within this council, and we have to keep in mind David Thoreau's idea that we govern best which governs the least. We have to define exactly what we should do as a council and what we shouldn't do, what is discretionary, what is statutory. And within those parameters, we have to be mindful of our own internal cost controls as well. And my question really is, are we sort of keeping a lid on our internal cost of doing business to run the council itself, thinking about recruitment was mentioned earlier, about the FTEs, what we spend as a council, and are there things that we should do, and there are things that we definitely shouldn't do. But like with all public bodies and administrations, it believes it should have a hand in everything and pay for everything from the taxpayer's purse. Are there areas we could look at which would help ease and alleviate those costs, which could then be transferred to areas such as children's and other needy services?
Yeah, if I may pick that up to begin with, absolutely right. As you're aware, we've been doing a lot of work with efficiency and looking at the FTE numbers and bringing those down, which have come down quite substantially. Also, a large bit of work was undertaken with limiting agency spend on areas where that was possible to do so. Of course, the FTE numbers are, I was going to say seasonal, I wouldn't describe it as seasonal, but there will be instances where that sees an increase, where perhaps, and I think we've had an influx of people coming across from Entrust as an example, but you know, it does form a large part of it, and the FTE numbers are being looked at. I think we do have to temper what we're doing there with what comes round the corner as well. I mean, you're dead right, we should be doing everything in the most efficient manner possible. However, we do need to be mindful of the fact that we've got the LGR work that we have to do down the line as well. But the FTE work and the efficiency work on that is not stopping, it is continue, and we're constantly looking at the efficiencies in that respect. So I don't know if...
Yes, Councillor Bagley. So, as Councillor Bagley's referred to, the efficiency programme last year delivered sizable savings that supported the in-year position that's accounted for in the underspend, and ongoing with savings that will be baked into the MTFS. I think we need to be mindful of, as an authority, we're not an outlier in our support costs to support an organisation of this size, and actually in percentage terms it is quite small compared to the majority of our frontline services, which is where we spend those costs. But absolutely right and proper, we need to ensure that they are efficient and effectively well run. There's a number of significant change programmes in place at the moment, trying to utilise digital solutions to enable that into the future. So our new ERP system, our Care Director Replacement Programme, that will ensure that our teams are operating as effectively and efficiently as possible, and utilising digital means where we're able to do so. But it's a really important point that we keep a strong focus on that.
Councillor Farrell.
Yeah, thank you. I don't mean to make this all about LGR, but there's 3 recommendations in this report, and B is to approve the newly set up earmarked reserve to support future spend associated with LGR. I've been trying to find in the report what that is. There's a point on 122 that basically just says the same again, but doesn't actually go into detail about the earmarked reserves. Can you just explain what those reserves are? I don't need specific numbers, but just generally, I presume lots of councils across Staffordshire will be putting a pot aside for LGR, but how much of it do we need to put into it as one of the bigger councils? What does that pot do? Can you just expand slightly into that, please?
Thank you, Councillor Farrell. So I think in the previous agenda item, we have been told that there's around £1 million that's been allocated for each of the new unitary authorities to help fund some of that transformation. Around £2.3 million, which I think is the figure you're looking for in the report, was taken from those staffing vacancies that were held last year to pump prime, effectively an LGR reserve, and that is sitting there. In terms of ongoing costs, they are sizable, although the majority of those costs will probably come post-vesting day for those newer authorities. So ultimately, the cost to fund LGR will be the cost, and we'll have to meet that. The business case presented to government was that there would be a repayment of that and efficiencies that would flow. So I think there is a small sum allocated, but we need to be mindful that actually most of those costs will fall on the new future unitary.
If I could just come back slightly, thank you for that answer. I mean, the figures I think that was provided on the last slide are about £32 million, the cost of LGR to us. What concerns me, and I'm sure it concerns you and probably keeps you awake at night as well as me, is the fact that many councils around Staffordshire are trying to operate some kind of fire sale or trying to spend as much money as possible before LGR. Not all of them, but I hear that some of them are potentially going to do that. I do worry that we're going to find ourselves in a position where we're going to create 2 new councils with money that isn't enough to cover what's needed to set up those new services. So looking ahead to the MTFS, and this council has got one more proper budget left until it disappears. Does this worry you? And do you think we should be looking at new measures to rise council tax? I know that this report isn't about this. I'm just thinking generally about LGR. Does it concern the cabinet member or the officer?
Yeah, firstly, the sleepless nights, it goes alongside the overspend with children and families as well in terms of the sleepless nights, but to a certain extent, yes, it does. It is of concern. However, it's something we've got to deal with. Just in terms of the finances across the board, you make a very valid point when talking about potential fire sales, but people will look at the reserves and say, well, hold on a minute, you've got those reserves, why don't we use those reserves, because we're going to be starting from scratch. Now, that'll be absolutely, in my opinion, the wrong thing to do, because we've got to leave a legacy of this well-run, efficient council, and who knows, for those councils that maybe took that ridiculous decision and drove the reserves down to the floor, they might then be faced with a delay in LGR, then where would that leave them? So we've got to be very, very mindful of that. So very good question, but again, I'll hand over to Pete to expand on what I've just said.
So absolutely, I think it's we hold reserves to manage those financial risks, those unexpected emergencies that may come out, or potentially to fund future projects, of which LGR is one, and a small allocation to that would be right and appropriate. In terms of the split of those estimates of the 33 million you referred to, we probably expect around a third of those costs across Staffordshire to fall pre-vesting day, the majority falling post-vesting day, but that obviously that work will continue as we go through the programme and the project. I think it's for each of those authorities to decide what's an appropriate use of taxpayers' funds as to whether they are going to set up their legacy organisations for success, and they will have to make their own decisions around selling assets. But you're absolutely right, they would be wise to do what's right by the taxpayers of the county.
Are there any further questions? No? Thank you, Councillor Bagley, for going through the report, and Pete. For the recommendation, members are asked to note the final financial outturn report for 25-26 and advise of any further information and or actions required. Are we happy with the recommendation? Great. Thank you. Item 6, the Integrated Performance Report, Quarter 1. I invite the Leader of the Council and the Cabinet Member of Finance to present the report.
Thank you. This report presents the Council's Quarter-1 performance for 26-27 and is first aligned to our new strategic direction and delivery plan. Bringing together delivery, performance, financial information, it provides a clear overview, progress against our priorities and medium-term financial strategy. The report reflects a positive start to the year and most strategic projects are on track and performance measures meeting are or in line with targets, demonstrating the impact of the work of Staffordshire's residents, communities and businesses. I'd like to draw attention to a few of the report's key highlights. Across the organisation, we are seeing strong progress with 32 of our 39 delivery projects currently on track. This means we are successfully turning our priorities into actions, including expanding inclusive education provision for children and young people, delivering our health checks programme across the county, strengthening skills, employment and business support, and improving digital transport connectivity to support residents and economic growth across the county. We are also continuing to invest in our communities through initiatives such as library development, community safety programmes, wider transformation activity, including progressing major programmes of work, including digital innovation and preparations for local government reorganisation. The performance picture is equally positive, with 14 of the 23 key measures meeting or exceeding targets. There are several areas of strong performance to highlight, including Highways team delivering 100% of emergency defect repairs within timescale. More than 9,600 health checks were completed to support better long-term health outcomes. Our jobs and career services continue to help residents into employment. Start-up and step-up programmes are supporting increased numbers of local businesses to grow and succeed. Our library, archives, heritage services continue to attract growing numbers of volunteers, up by 6.8%. It's also great to see our customer satisfaction score remaining high at 90% and reflecting the quality of services being delivered. While there is much to celebrate, we recognise the ongoing challenges with children's social care and SEND services, where rising demand driven by local and national pressures continues to place pressure on capacity and finances. We have clear improvement plans in place and remain committed to ensuring vulnerable children and families receive the support they need. Overall, this report shows that we are a well-run council. Despite the ongoing challenges, we continue to deliver our strategic direction and improve outcomes for Staffordshire residents. I'll now hand over to Sean Bagley, our Member for Finance and Resources. Sean.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, to a certain extent, we've already alluded to some of the areas we're going to look at the Q1 finance overview. But essentially, the Quarter-1 revenue forecast is reporting an overspend of 19.8 million against the balanced budget, representing 2.48% of net expenditure. The pressure, as we've already discussed, is almost entirely attributable to children and family services, particularly the increasing number and costs of residential placements for children in care, together with pressures within family safeguarding services. Members should note that other directorates are either forecasting break-even positions or modest underspends. A significant package of mitigating actions is being implemented within children and families, including strengthening placement management, reviewing the sufficiency strategy, expanding in-house provision and enhancing demand management arrangements. The capital programme remains in a stable position with forecast expenditure of 246 million against a revised budget of 245.7 million, and the programme remains fully funded. Financial health indicators remain strong, with 97.9% of invoices paid within 30 days and debtor levels remaining within target. Savings delivery is also progressing well, with 11.738 million of the 13.420 million savings programme currently assessed as high confidence of delivery. In summary, Quarter-1 presents us with a significant financial challenge, and mitigating actions are required to balance the books both in year and for the future MTFS. We will continue to monitor the situation in children and families closely and will report back to Cabinet in due course. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I've got two questions. They're both separate, if you don't mind. Question number one, it's on your priority 3, connectivity. I'll give you some places in Staffordshire. Cannock Chase, Burton, Mile Oak in Lichfield. Those are just 3 places in the last week I've had 0 phone signal. I literally can't get hold of anyone. And last year I went to Morocco on holiday, and I went to the Sahara Desert on a camel and got 4G. I don't understand why in this day and age we cannot get good phone signal in our areas. Now, I know it's not the job of the county council to get better phone signal, but it comes under connectivity and digital infrastructure. So I just wondered what the Cabinet members' thoughts were in terms of bad connectivity in Staffordshire.
I'll check your provider, because Cannock Chase, I'm in there every single day of the week, and I've not had an issue in Cannock Chase. I drive through it every single day to come here, but I also walk the dog over several different areas of it, and it is a area of outstanding natural beauty, so you can't really put pylons in the middle of it either. But I do have decent... No, but you are right. This isn't something we have full control over with phone signal, but it is something we are pushing. We have been pushing with the fibre link going on out. We hopefully will have better answers for those rural areas where the exponential cost to reach single dwellings several hundred metres up to a mile out makes it unsustainable. We have now got lower cost for the Sky satellite links that are now helping all of our farms, not just the county farms, across all farmers. That's come way down in price. That really helps with those in connectivity. We are looking as well for expansion within the 5G sphere. Again, that will boost with the home and business fibre connection link, that they can link off with the 5G towers rather than the hard link. Some of it belongs within the private sector, and it's demand-led. We have been pushing them harder, giving some key deliverables, especially for our rural community, which Staffordshire. A lot of people forget how rural Staffordshire is, and I know you know that. It does have some great, well-built-up, productive manufacturing areas, but at the heart of it, we're a rural county. Needs more pushing, and I hope some of the insights I just know off the top of my head shows it is still a key priority of ours to make sure that comes through.
And I'll get my second one out of the way, if that's okay, Chair. It's a bit more of a serious one, actually. It's the priority 5 under efficiency and value for money. If you look at the delivery table, there is one item in red, and that's workforce efficiency. Could you expand on that, please?
Yeah, this is in relation to the FTEs that I referred to before, and the targeting there for the FTE reduction. Now, this is very much, I was going to use the word seasonal. I don't mean seasonal, but it does vary depending on what part of the year we're at. And there'll be certain times when we do see an influx of people coming into the equation, which will increase the FTE numbers. Again, I don't know if Pete wants to expand on that particular one.
Thank you, Councillor Bagley. And I think principally the report is highlighted red here in acknowledgement that there's a paper due to Cabinet around workforce efficiency. So that milestone had slipped at that point in time. It's now returned to amber in the latest month, and that paper will be coming forward to Cabinet for them to make an informed decision moving forward around that project.
If I may just add as well, I mean you make a good point, and it highlights the importance of using these reports, because it shows where we're at in that situation. It shows that we're behind scale, and it also highlights the fact that we are taking action and deciding whether it's still the right thing to do, because that ultimately that often can be the case. It may be decided that it's not the right thing to do to complete reducing FTE numbers. If it is, then we will do. If it's not, then we'll review the actual action.
Sorry, I don't want to hog it, but I just something that's come to me during that, and I think that's a good explanation, is as members, the officers I think we deal with the most are our community highways teams. They're very important and very good at what they do. But it's my experience that around the county, those teams are dwindling in numbers, and when somebody leaves that team, they're often not being replaced. You know, highways is something that people really care about, and when they leave their house, the first thing they see is the pothole or the dangerous junction that they care about. And obviously, as councillors, we get it in our inbox a lot. So does the Cabinet member think we should put more resource into those community highways teams in order to, you know, give members kind of the clarity and the trust they need that their roads are being dealt with properly?
At this stage, I wouldn't like to just commit and say I think we should put more resource into it. I mean, a large amount of resource is going into it, and as far as I'm aware, I don't know which DHP area you come under, but under mine, for example, there has been an increase in personnel working from that depot. So again, it's probably one for the portfolio holder in that area to go into a bit more detail, if I may leave that one.
Just add on that, you bring up highways. I think we need to celebrate the highways. I'm looking at the stats here, that in the last quarter, we've actually repaired 12,636 potholes. That's up 35.39%. We're doing April 4,356, May 3,625, June 4,655. Plus emergency ones, that's the more severe ones, are at 100% repair. Outperforming at highways, that's the latest stats there. In June, that's up 41.89%. I think we need to give all those services out there, those people on the roads every day. Something I brought up before, a real shout out, because they're not always treated with the greatest respect, often by other drivers. So they really do shout out. They're delivering the numbers.
Councillor White.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just on that final point there, I'll just echo the comments about the people who work for the people of Staffordshire out on our roads, because that's what they're actually doing. They're not working for the county council. We're the people who Staffordshire County Council's on their pay slip. They're working for the people of Staffordshire. I think it is despicable the way some people treat some of our workers, and shame on anybody who does that. At the end of the day, whatever they're doing out on the roads, we're the people who've asked them to go and do it as well. So if you want to sort of berate anyone, berate one of us. There is a question around quality of repairs that I know we discussed at full council, so I'm not going to go into it too much here, but it will be useful at some point to have some stats in terms of the number of temporary repairs. I know we're using a lot of velocity patching and screening and things like that now, and the value for money side of that is going to be something that we'll come back to, but I'll park that for today. What I wanted to ask about was just a couple of things. Firstly, there are a series of strategic reviews that are listed. I think we've got websites, legal services, customer, rights of way, digital transformation. They're all green. I was just wondering what practical outcomes we've had from those, what benefits have accrued to the organisation. And then I'll come back with one other question. Thanks.
Yes, I do apologise. Do you mind listing those again?
Yeah, that's fine. They're all in a table at page 106. I missed one because it's strat review rather than strategic review. So it's trading standards, websites, legal services, customer, rights of way, and digital translation. So a lot of strategic reviews, but I've got no idea what's actually come out of any of them. I don't think we've seen any detail about any of them.
No, I mean it's a fair comment, and it is right that they are showing positive, because there has been a lot of work that's perhaps gone on behind the scenes which we needed to publicise a bit more. The rights of way work is being dealt with. As you know, that's a long-standing issue with many cases on the go there. The legal services review, we're doing a lot of work. In fact, we're due at one later on today, looking at the efficiencies that can be gained there, looking at the charging models, and looking at where we can use technology to improve efficiencies. The website, that's from memory, has already gone ahead and changed, and the figures we're talking about here, isn't it? It's not huge amounts, but it's in the region of £120,000 saving from the improved the website use. And the, forgive me, was one other area there? Sorry, I'm just trying to... Translation services.
Yeah,
yes,
it was,
yeah. Yeah, and that's...
Digital improvement.
Digital improvement. Translation services, that's been actioned and is being used and pushed out throughout the council. What I would add, if I may, on the juncture of digital and transformation, I attended, I very kindly invited to the digital SLT meeting last week, and I think it demonstrated the huge commitment that we have and drive throughout the council to improve efficiencies through the use of digital. The translation services, the use of reporting on there, and there's also a whole host of other areas that have been looked at as well. So if it's of use, I can arrange to have sent through the chair an update of where we're at with those various areas, just so you've got a record of it as well. But I don't know if Pete's got anything to add to that.
No, nothing further to add, thank you.
Okay, that's great, thanks. Yeah, it's... Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say I'm happy to come in and just provide a bit more detail on a couple of those if it's helpful. So can specifically speak to the two around translation interpretation services and the work that we've done around websites, but just to also give some assurance generally about how we're managing strategic reviews. So absolutely 6 were included as part of the delivery plan. Those are tracked through our quality performance and improvement board arrangements, so reported on in the usual way as you'd expect in accordance with all of the projects that contain within the delivery plan. Put in place a really clear process to make sure that we didn't lose sight of strategic reviews and whatever the outcomes findings are as a result of that work. Importantly, they were reviews, not necessarily intended to be ongoing work, but certainly for translation services and websites, the findings have meant that then we have committed to absorbing any ongoing activity through business as usual. The process also calls for the relevant portfolio lead to sign off the findings from those different reviews. So for those 2 that I've just mentioned specifically, had the conversation with Councillor Bagley to give some assurance around we've concluded the work, these are the findings now, this is what we're going to do on an ongoing basis. The reviews themselves don't necessarily identify significant financial savings or anything like that. What they do is give some assurance around the way we work and the way we might want to work moving forward. So one example of that, without going into too much detail, is around how we manage any further commissioning of websites. Again, links back to LGR and so on. We wouldn't want to be commissioning lots of new things as we go through the course of the next few months. So some clear processes in place to make sure that we have oversight of that. So hopefully that gives some assurance. Thank you.
No, that's really, really helpful. Thank you. I think one of the things that's really important for me, as I'm sure it is for others, is that these reports don't just monitor activity. We're looking at outcomes. I think because these are labelled as strategic reviews, if you didn't understand the council and the size of some of these activities relative to our budget, so say the £120,000 saving you mentioned for websites, that's brilliant. We want that money, but you know, what's our turnover at the moment, Finance Director?
Around 850 million net budget.
So as a strategic review, I think arguably that's overblowing it a little bit. So I would propose that perhaps in future reports we have these grouped together as one. If it's mostly activity based and we're completing these efficiently, we can pull out any highlights. So if we're saving money on websites or whatever it is in the future, do that. But I think it slightly misrepresents how important this is to the organisation when you look at some of the other things that are covered by one line. So if you could consider that, I'd be really grateful. The other thing I just wanted to discuss, which illustrates the point, I think, is on the same page we've got social care management system down as an amber. Now, usually I'd focus in only on the reds in these sort of discussions, but mindful of that really big conversation that we've been having today around the overspend in children's services, which I think is likely to be everybody's big takeaway from today, that is on the business as usual side of what we're doing now, along with the LGR stuff, that is the big thing that we've got to manage. That social care management system underpins all of that, doesn't it? It indicates here that delivery of the new system is facing some challenges due to delays in data migration and testing. Now we're doing that running up to that cliff edge of the transfer to the new authorities. That's got to be done by the time we hand over the baton. So could we have a little bit more detail about where we are up to with that? I would like some reassurance, and I expect it will be there, that that is not at risk of turning into a red, because that needs to be a green. And that's all of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, some of that extra detail actually fits within the portfolio holder, that again does come to these committees. We do have the committees covering all those, and obviously the scrutiny is on them. But on the detail within here, it does, and I think it's a valid point. This is not a short term, and it must be ready to be handed over in the best possible format and long-term fix. This is not a quick win headline. This has to be a strategic fix for generations to come. Michelle?
Yeah, some reassurance about it not turning into a red would be really good.
Happy to come in, and Pete might want to do this as well. So really timely actually to be asking that question today. So yesterday we had our Quality Performance Improvement Board, the monthly one that we have. There was a deep dive discussion specifically on this, where we talked about where we're at in terms of delivery of the project overall, ability to meet ultimate timelines and some of the current pressures and how we respond to those. And I think suffice to say, again, Pete will come in, I'm sure, that there was assurance around that. Clearly a critical point in terms of the project around releasing capacity to conduct testing and all the important things that have to happen before a system implementation goes live. So everybody is working to ensure that we meet those deadlines, but the discussion yesterday was around reinforcing across the leadership team the need to ensure that we're all fully committed to making sure that that happens. But again, Pete, I don't know if I've missed anything.
Because just to chip in, we're due to start that in children's in October. Okay. So it's quite soon, isn't it?
Nothing further to add really to what Michelle said, that the Liquid Logic programme is on target. There are some risks that sit around that, principally around capacity and releasing people for the testing and training of the new system. However, there was a full commitment from SLT yesterday given that this is a priority project, and therefore the timescales cannot be slipped for that implementation that you've already alluded to.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. Just to Councillor Farrell, I drive past Mile Oak very regularly, as you know. I'll probably change my phone provider in terms of the signal, because I never appear to have anyone. 3's a good one, but I'm not getting advertising for that. Councillor White, I'm in the danger of agreeing with him here. You know, it is unusual. I have a problem with, the strategy's great, no problem. It's the visual look of this and the clarity. The point we do reports is it's got to be clear, easy to read, understandable, and actions taken. I think RAG reports are virtually useless, in my opinion. They're very old-fashioned. They don't really give clarity. They're too long. I mean, this report is nearly 200 pages long. You can bury anything in the detail in this and not expose it. We did originally say, about 6 months plus, that we were going to move from RAG reports to a dashboard system. We'd had agreed with that. And that will give members that ability to see things more clearly, speed direction of projects, again, measure it against real-time budgets and so on and so forth. And I'll give you an example. Page 76, it says Appendix 4, Financial Health Indicators. I go down to one of the boxes, monitoring. Quarterly financial monitoring reports have been issued to the Cabinet during the last 12 months. Green. What's the point of that? Completely pointless. Makes no point whatsoever. It doesn't add anything to the conversation or the debate. Another example here on the same topic, quarterly monitoring reports of progress against the MTFS savings have been produced for the SLT during the last 12 months. Well, big deal. That doesn't tell me where the project is, where it's going. Are we on budget? Are we not on budget? Is it going to be delivered or not? That's not clarity. We need to improve. We need to step up here. We need to, in my opinion, and I don't know what other members think, but we need to make these reports sharper, clearer, better ability for people to read it and digest information quickly, and then make really good positive results. But apart from that, strategic direction I agree with. It's just the visual bit, and I think that hopefully the officers can improve on that. Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Egerton.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make this crystal clear, as Councillor just mentioned. Just a quick one. Following on from the motion, that was approved in the Chambers last week with regard to the peak cluster project, the carbon capture scheme. One for the budget responsibility, really. We was just wondering what the possibly financial implications of this experiment would cost this county. So we just need to be aware of the implications financially that could come our way. This national infrastructure project, which you've all heard about before, is similar to HS2. And we mentioned this, myself and Councillor White, last week. And I think, do you want to have a few words, Councillor White, on this? Thank you, Chair.
If you're happy to be Chair. So it's just in terms of what the implications might be for this authority. Yeah. So it might be one to come back to us on, but we were mindful in discussions that it might be that the authority wishes to take a position of opposing the peak cluster pipeline, in which case does that have financial implications for us in terms of setting aside a budget for legal advice. The best example of it is probably HS2, where we passed a motion in this council that we would oppose HS2 and that we would commit spend to quite an expensive legal process to oppose that. And then secondly, whether if it does go ahead, whether there would be any officer time or specific officers allocated to managing the impact of that, because it's an enormous project. It's going to carve up the moorlands, and that has an impact in a similar way to HS2. So it might be one to come back to us on, but it seemed to fit in this part of today's proceedings.
If I may, I think you give a very valid point. You did a legal challenge against a project running by yourself, cost a fortune, and it still went ahead, and then was later cancelled because it didn't come from the north to the south. Shows the idiocy of planning set by another government previously beforehand that never got actualised. This does have similar tonations, that it's a plan that comes from different areas with no real delivery that nobody really wanted and put through the wrong way. Legal challenge is costly and I think does nothing because they still just override you. Is what they can do. Now what it does here matter is what we did beforehand and what we did at Scrutiny, and we laid down some implications we'd like to see, because planning has yet to be proposed for this. Now again on that is where we do the work. Does the cost come to this county council? On this one, no. It will fit within the Northern Unitary when that sets up, because now planning has been done. That's where any future costing will lie, and that's again is why we need a single Staffordshire, because now we'd have a stronger voice, and if it became mayoral, some more influence and decision making upon that, which would help, not necessarily stop it, but would certainly help. Start of a battle to come, but the initial cost implications, no, because no planning has been presented. By the time it does, it will actually fit under the unitary, which will be under the north, not passing it over to them, but it highlights the importance of a single Staffordshire voice, a devolved power which would give greater voice and strength to object.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just again, unanimity. We're going to break out here, actually agreeing with everybody here today. HS2 is mentioned across the county, and that is still continuing. It has been a horrendous blight on the county of Staffordshire over many, many years, and the southern part of the county, around the Tamworth and Lichfield area particularly. It suffers continually with that. And with the proposed idea of a pipeline across the north of the county, and I'm just worrying about the fact if in the future, if this thing fails or whatever, the companies go bust, can we indemnify ourselves against a potential Wally's Quarry situation where, an outside group end up going bust, should we say, and then the county and previously Newcastle was sort of put forward of picking up the bill in the tab for putting the environmental damage back into some good order. And I'd hate to see this idea of a pipeline being laid and all the damage that it does, and the people of Staffordshire Moorlands and the north of the county don't really have a say. It's, again, another thing that's imposed on them. And then in some future date, if it all goes wrong, or different companies pull out, who's going to pick up the bill for cleaning it up? Who's going to pick up the bill for reinstating the land and tidying up? Those considerations I don't even think have been considered at the moment. So there's huge issues, and we don't want another Wallace Quarry. Thank you.
Councillor White.
Yeah, it was just briefly, that's a really helpful answer from the leader. I am just mindful that this authority will be running until the 1st of April 2028, that the development consent order process by which the peak cluster decision will be made, it does have stages that take some time, so there's a couple of 3-month stages in that. But given that we are, have someone help me out with the exact timelines, but we're, what, 20 months out? Something like that. I could foresee a situation where this does happen during the period where we're still the accountable body, and I would certainly want us to have the option of having a lawyer making representations into that DCO process. So we don't need a final answer on it today, but I just like to know that that's been noted, and that it's something that you're aware of because we've discussed it today. And that your mind isn't completely closed to the possibility of that if we deem it necessary, because it is a real concern that this thing might happen without Staffordshire's voice being heard properly. Down in Westminster, there seems to be a bit of a theme at the moment, doesn't it?
Another one, Chair. With the peak cluster, it's already sort of happening at the minute. I know we're in the consultation process. They are sending letters out asking for compulsory purchases for different sites at the minute. They are digging up the countryside, doing test holes and experimental digs to just see where the rock lies over the hills type of thing. So yeah, it is sort of carrying on at this minute, even though we're in a consultation process. So it's nice to be, made aware of.
Yeah, I'm fully aware of it all. I think we need to bring back to the performance report on this, on it all. I mean, it's this performance report we're doing right now. I mean, this was originally formatted. It shows it's a huge budget responsibility. This was fully approved by Cabinet on the changes for it all. I mean, this 840 million organisation, it's very big, very complex. So we need the detail in the reports. It's need to focus back onto this, highlighting it's a dumbed down report isn't quite right. It's an excellent first look for public view. It's a great asset that we change to give everybody that viewpoint up. It now allows us to bring up future points like peak cluster, national infrastructure points to see future heads up on there. Move on to any other questions on it if we can.
Are there any further questions? No. I'll just go over my questions now. So on the bar chart showing the performance, it's good work compared to the last year's performance data we were shown. These bar charts are far better to see because you have each month and you can see the trend of where it's going. But I do think that there's ways to improve this still. I'll probably outside the committee today I can give some. I've got questions here about stuff that needs adding. So outside of this, are you happy for me to go out and talk to you about ways to improve the performance reports? Are you happy with that?
Yeah, I'll always just going to hold great value in what these meetings do. So any considerations will be looked at with a more serious view to change. So anything you'd like to see put in there, put it forward. Absolutely, we'll look at it at the highest of level.
All right, thank you. So I think any committee member who has problems or ideas of what could improve it, just come to me and then I can try and voice it over to the cabinet and see what officers can do and all that. So after the meeting or in my emails, please get back to me and hopefully we can improve our concerns. Back on the financial side of this, so of course in this report it's about the 20 million overspending children in our care. I'm just wondering, so what is being done about this now? So I know there's a restructure, there's money being put into it. And also, I just want to know from the previous report, if I can get to it, it notes that there was significant failings in 2019, 2022 and 2023. So I assume those problems in the previous years have probably come to now where there's more children in our care. So what happened to that for like the amount of if you look at the graph, the amount of children in our care is rapidly increasing now. So what happened in those years for it to be happening now?
I'll pick up that to begin with. I mean, it's a very good question. It was described as being not fit for purpose before, and improvements were needed to be made in what they refer to as the front dooring policy. Now, obviously, the actual area itself is not my area of speciality, but essentially, by reviewing the, and I'm always wary of using terminology I shouldn't be using, but for want of a better word, the entry criteria for individuals that are at risk and need to go into these places, then that effectively opened the door for a number of people who did meet the criteria, and hence we've seen the huge spike in numbers. There has been suggestions that it was a foreseen problem. Now, I can't necessarily comment on that, but now what we're seeing is the fruition of a change to the front door policy, which has seen this sudden spike and ongoing increase in numbers in the children that are going to be put into these residential places.
And a national increase as well.
Yeah, I mean, as the leader says, I mean, it's not unique to Staffordshire. We're seeing this across the board nationally, and it's an area that it's going to need some serious attention, obviously locally, but also nationally as well. So I don't know if anyone's got anything further to add on that.
Thank you for that. Otherwise, are there any further questions? No? I'll go on the recommendations. So a few to add today. So on the strategic reviews that was brought up, if the committee could have the outcomes of these reviews sent to it and we can look at this information. So that's one of them. So the other one was coming to me about problems of the performance report and see if we can work out improving it. So that's going to be one of them too. And for the last one in the report, that members are not asked to note and challenge performance and advise any further information and or action required. Are we happy with these recommendations? Agreed. Thank you very much. Item 7, the Treasury Management Report. Councillor Bagley, could you go through the report for this year?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll just run through the summary of the Treasury Management Report for the period ending 31st of March 2026. The Treasury Management Report, period ending 31st of March 2026, covers all Treasury activity between the 1st of April 2025 and the 31st of March 2026, and is a retrospective report for information. Treasury Management covers the authority's strategy and processes of borrowing, lending and cash management, and this is done taking into consideration the interest rates and economic conditions prevailing at the time, both nationally and globally. The Council takes a prudent and low-risk approach to Treasury Management, focusing on the security and liquidity of funds. The activity is performed in accordance with all external and internal regulations and is regularly monitored by the Director of Finance and Resources. The Council, during this period, repaid £30.5 million of external loans, and by using cash reserves rather than borrowing more, was able to avoid additional interest payments in what remain challenging financial times. By following the approved investment strategy, the Council was able to gain a return on its investments of 4.29%, which was higher than the agreed benchmark of 3.52%, whilst considering risk above return. As a Council, we will spend and invest carefully, focusing on our priorities and directing our resources to where they are most needed. And I shall hand over for questions now. Thank you.
Open the committee up to questions. Are there any questions on this? Oh, Councillor White.
Do you know what, it's too important for somebody not to say something, because this is looking after our taxpayers' money and making sure that we're getting the best return for it, whilst keeping it safe. You can find a question here if you want to, but I think it's just to pay a compliment to everybody who's involved in this within the finance team, Councillor Bagley, you're eminently sensible in terms of politically leading that as well, and that we continue to have a really strong approach to Treasury management here. I suppose the question, because I better have one, is do we intend to continue in a similar vein for the remainder of this council's existence?
Yeah, thank you for those wise words. Absolutely. I think the prudence associated with the way we invest within our treasuries is to be commended. And I mentioned in the report about risk outweighing returns, which is always sensible. I've heard horror stories from other organisations, other local authorities who've taken what can only be described as ridiculous amounts of risk and even borrowing money to invest in certain areas, which is just an absolute no-no. So absolutely, fully concur with what you're saying, and absolutely continue to measure it and manage it in exactly the same way. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Cooper?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, no, I agree. I think an excellent job here on the Treasury report. I know my colleague is a great poker player. He enjoys that in his spare time. I've played myself. But this is something you don't do that with. This is public money, as we said before. We have a responsibility. It is other people's money. We look after it on behalf of the people of Staffordshire, and we should exercise that duty carefully and wisely. I think it's an excellent job, and the risk element is sufficient, I think, to cover the needs that we require. We could always do with more money, but we have to live within our means.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's also important to continue to monitor the situation. Dare I refer to the 10-year bond returns at the moment within the UK being sort of, shall we say, on the high side, and I think as a result of that we need to be very mindful that we need to review the situation, because what might have been deemed to be a AAA gilt-edged investment in the past, some commentators might not deem to be the same now under the financial managing of the government we have in place at the moment. I think that's probably the politest way of saying it, but thank you.
Thank you. I just want to comment to that. Yeah, the report is clear and I can't see any problems with it. So if there's some of the further questions for the recommendation, members are asked to note and challenge Treasury management activities and advise of any further information and or action required. Are we happy with the recommendation? Thank you. Item 8, review of representation of outside bodies. I think it's Councillor Murray who will be presenting this.
Thank you. This should be quite simple, really. It's a review about ensuring that Staffordshire County Council representation on outside bodies remains relevant, effective and delivers value for money. I mean, just over time, the number of these organisations which Council is represented has grown, and it's right that periodically we review where those appointments continue to serve as a clear purpose. The recommendations before the members are based on feedback from councillors, engagement with the organisation themselves, further research where response was not even received, and the aim is not simply to reduce numbers but to ensure that our involvement supports the council priorities, strengths and important partnerships and focused members' time where it can make the greatest difference for Staffordshire residents. And I welcome the committee's considerations of the proposal and any recommendations it may wish to regard for future ones.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Murray, on that. No, looking down the list of these outside bodies, I agree with the idea. There's an awful lot here that we don't either engage with or no contact with. There's got to be a cost element in that, hasn't there, in terms of officer time or support to manage things we don't appear to be having any meaningful delivery with. I go down from page 181. Either says no contact or none since 2023, etc. There's a whole raft of these. Some you've actually put at the bottom, no longer required since a review last year. Are there any more we can identify, remove and save some theoretical cost for?
I'll pass over to Chris Ebley on this, that did the work.
Thanks, Leader. Councillor Cooper. So, yeah, just to be absolutely clear, these aren't our committees or bodies. These are outside bodies to which we send councillors to represent us. So, as is referenced in the report, we are looking to reduce the current list, which was 104, removing 14, as you quite rightly say, Councillor Cooper, because some of them, in which case, no longer exist. So, yes, because of their non-response or the fact that they don't want us there anymore, would reduce it from 104 by 14, so down to 91. But in terms of the cost sort of saving, sorry, I should say on that point as well, because these aren't our bodies, there is little to no officer involvement in any of these outside bodies in any case.
Councillor Humphreyson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question about a specific one that's on the removal list, really. The Sir Graham Balfour High School Joint Use Sports Facilities Management Liaison Group. It says no contact on there. I just wanted a bit more information on that, because the Sir Graham Balfour High School is part of the 1816 partnership that regularly feeds into the Charity and Trust Committee that I'm chair of, and I'm also on the other outside body for that, their management group. So I was wondering how that fits in with the rest of it, and odd that there was no contact from it. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have any further information regarding a particular, and for any member actually of the County Council, any information that you have regarding an outside body, please do share that with us. We did write out to all members who are the appointed reps on these outside bodies for any information, and as it states in the report, Councillor Humphreyson, we've had no information. I can't give you any more than that. We've asked and we've exhausted every avenue that we have. But clearly, if you have any intel, please do send it to us.
The head teacher of that school, I mean, Councillor Baker sits on the committee with me. We went and visited that school last month, was it, the month before? Yes, we actually went over and spoke to the head teacher, and he's really quite communicative on emails. So I'm surprised that he obviously didn't, whether we need to be on it or not, I'm not saying I'm specifically one. Maybe emailing him directly, I would say he should come back to us. He seemed a very amicable bloke.
Can I just ask that? Obviously, you sit on that committee, you meet with those. Are they actually aware that this outside body exists? And that is where these outside bodies need adjusting. They get set up in the best intention. People forget about them, yet they still exist. Bigger points often is fits across district, boroughs, parish councils, everyone. Is it needed is the first point in question. And if you're already involved, it might not be. If it needs regenerating, then absolutely.
Councillor Farrell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't want to go into too many specifics. I'm happy with the report, but just want to ask the officers generally, because in my area I've got 2 quarries that I sit on one, the Shire Oak Liaison Board. I'm registered down to also sit on the Hints Quarry. I've never been contacted by Hints Quarry. I have reached out to them and I haven't heard anything back. So I wonder if they maybe either could be put in the no contact list, or if officers could help me, because if I sit as a representation on that quarry board, I want to sit on it, but if it doesn't exist, then I'm happy to take it off.
If it's okay, Chair, we'll pick that one up with Councillor Farrell offline.
Councillor Humphreyson.
My next point was very, very similar to Councillor Farrell's then. So I, as part of my division, got Coxbarrow Lane group. Again, I've heard nothing off them. I can't find any contacts for them. And there's been no meetings sent over the last, well, what, nearly 18 months now. So I'm wondering whether that one's even needed now either.
Thank you, Councillor. So that's very much the view that we've taken when we did this review and the one prior, that if we don't hear from them, we just assume that they don't want us there. So why waste your time or that of any other members for that matter? So we will engage with you outside of the meeting and then look to remove you off the list, or remove that from the list.
Councillor White.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so this is a sensible housekeeping exercise, isn't it? Overall, and the majority of the appointments on here are for organisations that no longer serve a function. There are some on here where it's a little bit ambiguous, and I don't want to sort of pick off ones on the list today, because this is supposed to be overview rather than diving into the detail. But what I would like some assurance on is that before this is enacted, and apologies for creating work for you, assuming this is done, but I would be reassured to know that all members will be contacted who currently sit on any of these. If it's just notify them and say this no longer exists or doesn't fulfil this function, fine. But there are some on here where it's saying county council representative is not required. You know, a member may have an opinion about local community safety, ones that immediately spring to mind with that, but there will be others. And to Councillor Farrell's point, I wonder if we might take the opportunity to reach out to members specifically, line by line, on the outside bodies they are appointed to and ask them if they do have any issues with any of them. Because I have no doubt that across the vast range of outside bodies that we are appointed to as members, and isn't it great that we do all of that work, making sure that Staffordshire people are represented in those places? But I'm sure there'll be others where there are sticking points where we might be able to lend a little bit of help. But starting with the ones where we're planning on removing them.
So absolutely yes, Councillor White, we will write to all members where there are any changes, and in terms of the second point, we have already, as part of this exercise, already written to all members who are representatives to ask them that very question, and in some cases we've had a response, in others not at all. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I remember doing the survey about, okay, have you heard from that body, outside body, and I remember filling it in. I assume some members haven't done that, so maybe a recommendation is to go back and see would they answer it again. So are there any further questions? Oh, Kate.
Thank you, Chairman. Just noting the questions that have been put today and to provide reassurance and perhaps some more background in relation to the work that's been undertaken in relation to this matter that's been alluded to by Mr Eberle. This piece of work has been undertaken over several months, and it is, and I can assure members that it's not just one point of contact that's been initiated with members or with the outside bodies. The queries were submitted, followed up and chased over a series of communications through the very dedicated commitment and work of Jen Norman in relation to this matter. We've only brought this report at the point that we're satisfied that we are not going to get any response from either the members or the bodies concerned. But members can also take reassurance from within the report that if there are any issues or subsequent requests for a representation to be readmitted, then that absolutely sits with the leader, and the report's clear that that can be addressed on a case-by-case basis, which again Mr Eberle has alluded to by reference to members bringing forward those issues following on from the meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? No? For the recommendations, members are asked to consider the list of outside bodies recommended for removal by the leader of the council and consider the list of outside bodies recommended to continue representation. Are we happy with the recommendations? Great. Thank you, Councillor Murray and Councillor Bagley, for attending today and going through all the reports. Hopefully you have a good afternoon. Item 9, work programme. Just to update people, committee members on the work programme. So on the 15th of December, we've added the ERP system implementation. For the MTFS working group, could I just formally appoint the members to this working group today? So that is Councillor Baker, Humphreys, White, Orlando Fattini, Councillor Griffiths, Clisset and Councillor Luca. Is everyone happy with these appointments? Yes. All right. Those will be formally appointed. Next, the risk register. A briefing paper has been agreed to be sent to the committee. On LGR, again, we're recommending this early in the report that it should come back to scrutiny and we can look at the governance, timeline, capacity. And on digital innovation, AI business case has been added to the 8th of September meeting. Are there any further questions on the work programme? No? Thank you. Item 10, exclusion of the public. I move that the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business which involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs of Part 1 of Schedule 12A as amended of Local Government Act 1972 indicated below.